You have the true heart of Russia. My dear Russian friends, may God bless you all.
He should have mentioned that he wishes he was Putin's dad and could have showed Putin a better way. Okay. What do we have next? We have fucking, oh God, we have chuds. We have the chud takes. The chud contributions. Oh God. This is actually quite interesting. This clip has started resurfacing. It's from the, it's actually from 2014. It was from the EU debates between Nigel Farage and Nick Clegg. And it was about Crimea in 2014. I wonder what they said about it.
How can Britain face up to international challenges like Russian intervention in Crimea without the political weight which comes from being part of the European Union?
So political weight
Good question, son. Fucking hell.
coming from the European
That shirt. Remember when in the 2014 or just before then when every fucking other guy wore this kind of shirt? Weird.
Union. Nigel Farage.
By not becoming a political union with an expansionist foreign policy with an aim to militarise as quickly as they can. Indeed, Baroness Cathy Ashton, the British Commissioner, is pushing very hard for a European Air Force. And
what a fucking bell piece. Jesus Christ. Is that why Ukraine was getting, is that why the annexation happened? Because of European military expansionism? Oh God. Yeah, the EU, yeah. What the fuck was the EU doing? Oh God. He doesn't know. This was no one gave a fuck about Crimea at this time, right? The only thing I knew about Crimea at the time was that most of them wanted to join Russia to some degree. Like, I think that's still kind of true.
For a series of drones. And if you actually look at what's happened with the Ukraine, we've had a message that's been sent out now for 10 years, and this is not just the EU. Indeed, David Cameron, Nick Clegg, and I'm afraid Ed Miliband too, have all been saying to the Ukraine, look, why don't you come and join the European Union? While you're at it, why don't you join NATO too? And this is something...
What a fucking dipshit. Oh my God. Like, first of all, like, the NATO discussion was pretty limited before 2014, but also, is he going to acknowledge that the Ukrainians wanted to side with the EU? Does this guy give a fuck about that very important variable?
That has been seen by Putin to be a deeply provocative act. We have given false hope to those Western Ukrainians. And did you see them with their EU flags and their banners?
Yeah.
They actually toppled a democratically elected leader. Yes, I know Ukraine's corrupt. I know he wasn't perfect, but they toppled a leader. And I do not want to be part of an emerging expansionist EU foreign policy. I think it'll be a danger to peace.
Next slide.
Well, his followers are going to think that he's correct about this. His followers are going to act as if Ukraine may be joining NATO and the EU, but not really, possibly. Not really that likely is the reason that Russia invaded. Whereas actually the opposite is true. If Ukraine had gotten into NATO in 2014, as well as the EU, then this wouldn't have happened. That would have probably not. Didn't he get ousted by his own party? I thought he left. Anyway.
So listening to that, it seems to me if I'm the leader of the party of in, Nigel Farage is the leader of Putin. And it's just extraordinary that his loathing of the European Union is so all-consuming that he is now seeking to justify and defend the actions of a man, Vladimir Putin, who, Ukraine is one thing. Look what's happening in Syria. He is the only man on the planet who, with one telephone call to President Assad, the most brutal dictator in the world, could actually help bring the participants to that awful, awful conflict to the negotiating table. There are 200 people dying in Syria, being mowed down in Syria, being killed in Syria every single day. And Nigel Farage says he admires the way that Vladimir Putin has played, as if it's a game, the terrible humanitarian catastrophe in Syria. He admires how Vladimir Putin has behaved there. That is why I think...
Focus on the topic, Nick Clegg.
Nigel Farage's position is absolutely indefensible.
Well, Nick, you, as Deputy Prime Minister, were happy to go and bomb Libya. You did that, and 3.5 years on, the situation in Libya is worse than it was. You were absolutely hell-bent on getting involved militarily in the war in Syria. And I personally am delighted we didn't go to war in Syria, and we're not going to get involved, I hope, in military conflict in the Ukraine. The British people have had enough of endless foreign military interventions. The situation in the Ukraine, in Syria, in Libya, these aren't simple black and white issues. And just to assume that if you support the rebels, you're supporting the good guys, frankly, flies in the face of history, and we should not. We should not be intervening. And I am not. I don't admire Putin. What I said was he'd outwitted and outclassed you all over Syria. I also said I didn't like him as a human being, and I wouldn't want to live in Russia. But what I want us to do, let's not meddle. Let's not meddle.
Hang on, just before you go on, you did actually say you admired him.
As an operator,
the
not as a human
question was,
being.
which current world leader do you most admire? As an operator, I would say Putin.
Yes.
I love that. Moderators as fact checkers, dude. Holy shit. If I ever moderate a debate, I'm gonna fact check every motherfucker. Oh God, I'm gonna be fucking blitzing this fucking machine right here. This will be my steel chair. This will be my tables, my ladders, and my chairs. And I will fucking annihilate these people. I'll just be like, hey, you fucking, I don't have anyone else's head to practice this on. Like, mate, 20% of Libyans in 2009 said, what? No, fact check, dipshit. Fuck you. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna both sides it. I'm gonna correct all the misinfo. Oh God, I love this. This is top modding right here. Not enough of it, I say.
I went on to say,
hey, F-bombs for you. How's it going?
David, that as a human being and with what he was doing imprisoning journalists, I did not support.
I need a team for that. Mythaldu, do you know who I am? I already obsessively fact check people in the middle of panel debate. It'll be fine. Don't worry. A team will be helpful though. Even though sometimes in the middle of debates, I don't fucking trust you guys. I'm sorry. I need sources. Sources or I'll ban everyone if I fuck up a fact check because I listened to a chatter who I had trust in. Oh God.
Can you just address Nick Clegg's point about Putin could have made one telephone call to Assad and that would have stopped?
Well, I think if Putin had not pointed out that the use of sarin gas had not necessarily come from the Assad regime, if he hadn't done that, I suspect the backbench rebels would not have defeated you, Nick, in stopping us from going. So you want...
Is he denying the chemical? Whoa.
Wanted us to go to war again. I'm pleased that your backbenchers voted against you, and Putin, I don't like the man, but Nick he contributed to that debate.
Nick Clegg, your turn.
Listen,
This did not age well. Now that we got fucking Russian mercenaries in Iraq, committing war crimes alongside the Assad regime. Oh shit.
President Assad denied that chemical weapons existed. It now transpires that he had the largest stockpile of these abominable weapons anywhere on the planet. Now, let's be quite clear what Nigel Farage said. He said about Putin, the way he played the whole Syria thing, brilliant, as if it's a game. This isn't some sort of pub bar sort of discussion. This is a serious issue about how we stop the slaughter, the displacement of millions of people, women and children being sexually abused, terrible violence on an unimaginable scale, and all that Nigel Farage can say, all he can say is he's played it brilliantly. This is an issue where, quite rightly, we in Britain, because we see this devastating humanitarian crisis on our television screens, we want to work with others to do something about it. Nigel Farage doesn't want to work with the Americans, he doesn't want to work with the rest of Europe, he only wants to side with Vladimir Putin, who's the only man, as I say, with one telephone call, who could bring this bloody conflict to an end.
So, Nick Clegg, Nick Clegg, can you come back to the question that Charles Hudson asked then? In what sense do we have political weight from being part of the European Union? And to what success in the Ukraine or Syria do you point that justifies it?
Look, we are part, in the European Union, Charles asked the question, of what is the world's largest economy, right? 500 million people, shoppers, who can buy our goods, who can buy our services. But they don't only buy our goods and services, and contrary to what you just heard from Nigel Farage, we export 50% of the things we produce to the European Union.
No,
they only
don't.
export 8% to us. But crucially, they also buy and sell as an economic superpower in this part of the world from Ukraine, from Russia, from the Middle East, from other parts of of many countries in our neck of the woods. So we have huge economic clout, which of course Vladimir Putin, which of course people in the Middle
Did Nick Clegg actually just like dodge the Ukraine question, either because he doesn't care or because he assumed the British public didn't care? But yeah, Farage was completely taking Putin's side there. Like, he didn't care. Farage actually treated the wishes of the Ukrainian people as if they didn't matter.
Middle East. Well, listen we don't have that if we were simply to isolate ourselves and cut ourselves off from our own European neighbours.
Yeah. That was a depressing debate. What else is Nigel Farage saying? This is him on, this channel is so trigonometry, bro. Like, did they not have a meeting and be like, mate, is it going to be 2016 forever? And then someone's like, probably not. Or we should probably change the name. Trigonometry. Fuck me. All right, let's see.
I'm going to butter you up a little bit before we get into a big disagreement about you bring up energy security. And so I'm going to butter you up a little bit before we get into a big disagreement about NATO and Ukraine. And
look
all
at
that.
these two fucking fannies. They're like the worst wankers. This like, okay. This is the worst fucking studio set I've ever seen. What? Look at these stupid fucking neon lights. These little fucking Mr. Men over here, little Lego wankers, little trigonometry mugs everywhere. What? Who's this as well? Oh god. What the fuck are Nigel's socks? Is he selling like cheap legal advice to fucking American criminals? I don't know. What's this? Oh, we're not opening that one. That's funny. Nice. Got him. Got him.
Because I do want to talk about geopolitics a little bit. But I think this actually plays into your motif more than anything else, which is globalization. It's the idea, oh yeah, we can buy our electricity from this and we can buy our steel from that and we can buy, and before you know it, Germany's importing its gas from Russia. And even if the West wanted to do
God damn it, he looks fucking deranged. The hell?
something there, I mean, you're being held hostage.
Yeah, the just-in-time supply chain. Don't vote Brexit, or you'll destroy the just-in-time supply chain. Well, the just-in-time supply chain suits giant multinational global corporations, but does away with any concept of nation, does away with any concept of a common good for a collective group of people in that nation. And this has been very much exposed. The German thing's incredible.
Wait, didn't a lot of the Brexiteers have like very close connections with Russian oligarchs? What the fuck's he talking about? Wait, wasn't it also the case that, was this actually proven that Russia contributed to the Brexit campaign? Did that actually happen? As well as election interference and operations, the report cites a range of other ways in which Russia is engaging with the United Kingdom, some of which have a potential to be malign. Many of these focus on money and especially property in London, which remains a popular investment for oligarchs with a historic connection to Putin. The report says some of their illicit finance has been recycled through the London laundromat and comments on their connections to political figures, including potential violations of campaign financing. It also notes that this has led to a growth of industry of enablers, including lawyers, accountants, and estate agents who are wittingly or unwittingly de facto agents of the Russian state. So did Russia ultimately shape the outcome? That's not really what I'm asking, though. Given that the result was exceptionally close and that if 1 in 50 voters had felt differently when they entered the polling booth, the result would have been different. The Kremlin operation could have tipped the balance. Okay. So it did happen. It's just whether or not I don't care whether or not they caused the thing to change. I don't think that's very... But so could many other things. That butterfly effect conundrum of sorts. Yeah. The lackluster Remain campaign. True. Bogged down by a disunited opposition. A government that miscalculated the risks. True. The pro-Brexit British media. True. Lack of transparency into the Leave campaign. True. Which the media failed to hold. Okay, so Russia was involved though, right? Cambridge Analytica shared data with Russia. Okay. There's one whistleblower testifying to the Senate. Okay. Okay. Nice.
Utterly incredible. There they were saying Brexit was funded by the Russians. Trump, is in Putin's pocket. It was Germany all the time. I mean, they've made themselves wholly dependent.
Wait. That doesn't actually disprove the first two claims, does it? I don't think it does, actually. I don't think that actually... The fact that Germany fucked up by depending too much, actually now, even though Germany have actually also gotten involved with SWIFT and in sanctions and in sending aid to Ukraine, so those are aggressively blue socks. Listen, don't worry about it, okay?
And that, of course, means that our threat of sanctions against Putin are completely and utterly hollow and meaningless because he can hurt the West far more than we can hurt him.
So let's talk about geopolitics. Now, look, I've just written a book called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West, and it's mainly about why I think what we have here is actually pretty good, and we should stop beating ourselves up about it. But part of my argument is also the more we focus internally, the more time we spend talking about, this comedian made this joke, and now we're all very upset for 3 days and whatever. The more we take eye off the ball, and that's why China is expanding into the South China Sea. It's getting bullish on Taiwan. You see what's happened in Hong Kong.
What? Because we're too focused on comedians? What? Is that how it's working? Our fucking China is sitting there going, all right, guys, come on. They're busy talking about Dave Chappelle and the turfs. Go! Now's our chance to strike. Okay, nice.
And Russia likewise. Do you think the West needs to rediscover its kind of ability to project power around the world? Because you seem concerned that NATO is expanding eastwards and all of that.
Look, I think we've made some massive geopolitical mistakes since 1990. The Berlin Wall had come down and we decided that NATO and the European Union would expand ever eastwards. Empires that are struggling for a role continue expanding. It's a good way of keeping going.
I know you just go into your answer, and I never interrupt guests generally, but let me just put a small counter argument. The reason NATO is expanding eastwards is because Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Ukraine feel terrified, rightly so, because only 70 years ago the Soviets invaded, massacred their elites, took over their country. They don't want that to happen again. It's not some bureaucrat in Brussels that's making that happen. It's those countries fearing for their survival.
This is him completely, this is the thing that Nigel was completely ignoring, because he actually doesn't give a fuck about Ukrainians or anyone in Eastern Europe, to be honest. He thinks they're Slavs and therefore like subhuman. Yeah, he's completely ignoring the fact that like people in Ukraine, did Nick Fuentes get his arguments from Farage? Well, they're all borrowing from the same playbook, right? They're all getting it from Russia. This is the Russian position. Yeah.
Just because they want to join doesn't mean it's a clever geopolitical move for us to say yes.
I'm saying the motivation for it.
It's definitely a clever move for them. There's a reason Lithuania is not getting attacked right now, even though actually like around 2014 when Crimea happened, like people I knew from like Lithuania and Latvia, I don't think I knew anyone from Estonia, we're all really worried about like Putin just being there like next door and shit. Like, yeah.
Expansion is not.
Look, if I was Polish, I would have wanted to join NATO.
True.
If I was Polish, I'd have crossed my fingers and voted to join the European Union, probably. I get that. But let's just think, let's just go back a bit further. Go back over the last couple of hundred years of the formal existence of nation states around the world. The concept of a buffer zone is actually quite an intelligent concept, okay? In the case of NATO, this ever eastwards expansion has been a deliberately provocative move against a Russia which has always been paranoid.
Ask him how it's provocative. Ask him. Like, why did these people keep on acting as if NATO... You know what? Like, the more I look at this, I'm actually like... I don't want to go all the way and say NATO is a defensive alliance. Like, I know that's what it calls itself. But it kind of, when it comes to Eastern Europe, it actually is. Like, when has NATO in Eastern Europe aggressed against Russia? It hasn't happened. The aggression they're talking about is the aggression that is against, not against Russia, it's against Russia's capacity to be aggressive. That's what NATO aggresses against, like, the options that Russia has to be aggressive. I'm okay with that. Vosh says NATO is a defensive alliance. Yeah, I mean, it kind of, in this situation, it actually is, though. In Eastern Europe, it is a defensive alliance. That's why those countries want to join, because it's like, and now they want to join even more. Have you seen RT? Ukraine is clearly the aggressor. Nice. I mean, it's definitely not an empire. That's like that's probably, of all the things you can call it, calling it empire is like the dumbest thing you can call it.
You know, the Cold War, Russia was far more scared of us than we were of Russia.
True.
And sometimes, I mean, if you want to resolve a conflict, right, sometimes what you have to do is to put yourself in the mind of the other person. It's rather like solving that crossword puzzle. You've got to think, you know, whoever wrote this, what were they hinting at? So we know Russia's paranoid. We know that the old traditional, you know, encirclement idea, invasion idea of Russia is something that motivates them very deeply. By the way, I don't doubt for a moment that Putin does have expansionist tendencies. However, here we are as we sit here today with 130,000 Russian troops massed on the border. He's making one key demand, which is that we say that the Ukraine will not join NATO.
The Ukraine.
Okay? We have Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, Boris Johnson, some woman called Liz Truss, who's become Foreign Secretary, God knows how, but anyway, there we are. And they're all saying, no.
Oh, God.
If the Ukraine wants to join NATO, they can. I suggest right now we say Ukraine will not be joining NATO. We do understand the concerns in Moscow.
Like, what's the fucking point here? Is this really the position of, like, we need to understand the aggressive military behavior of Putin? We need to just empathize with the guy who will invade a fucking country because he thinks someone else is trying to invade him. What? It's also just like the lack of consideration for Ukrainian people. Like, if you say that Ukraine will never join NATO, like, where's the guarantee that that keeps them safe? He went full Chamberlain. Yeah, the Putin the Putin whisperer, which is basically, you'll notice that all these Putin whisperers are also the same people who kind of are ideologically the same as Putin. In case, there's more viewers than usual here. In case, like, you haven't heard it, like, appeasement isn't about cowardice. I think we're actually seeing this here, like, very clearly, that appeasement has nothing to do with being scared. Appeasement is because, in large part, you agree with the person who's aggressing. That's appeasement. Appeasement is not Chamberlain going, oh, well, maybe if we're nice to the bad man, he won't be bad. No. Appeasement is Chamberlain going, yeah, you know what, right? Fuck communism, and this Hitler guy, he's really bad. He's really mean to communists, and we like that. He actually said that. Not in that way. He said something about Germany and Britain being like a pillar of resistance against communism. It wasn't appeasement out of cowardice. It was appeasement out of identification. It was appeasement out of, like, sympathy, out of, like, kind of like a shared understanding. That's what appeasement's about. Same with France. The French right wing had that famous slogan, better Hitler than Blum. Leon Blum, the French socialist prime minister or president, whatever. Yeah. The same thing. The French right wingers at the time had a slogan that they preferred Hitler to Blum. That might be a good video, actually. about the history, about like, because I think what's happening now shines such a bright light on like why appeasement happens, about the fact that it's motivated by people who are not scared of the aggressor, but kind of like the aggressor, kind of have a soft spot for the aggressor.
About ever eastward expansion. It has come to an end, and we now ask President Putin to stand his troops down on that border. We remove from him...
If they join NATO, they will not be safe? What, you think Russia's going to invade a NATO country? I guess we'll find out if they're firing at fucking Lviv.
...his casus belli. We take away from him any possible reason that he could have to mount an invasion. And
wait, that's not any possible reason, though. He's not just saying he's invading Ukraine because of NATO. Why wouldn't he just, if you take NATO off the table for Ukraine, which, by the way, Zelensky has done multiple times now. He's gone in public and said we're not joining NATO. The invasion hasn't stopped. If Zelensky said that, what else is... They're firing at Lviv. Yeah. Hypersonic missiles. You can look at that. Or in that area, yeah. What was I saying? What the fuck was I saying? Shit. NATO is not Putin's only reason for attacking Ukraine. If Putin leaves because Ukraine's no longer going to join NATO, that's the Russian public going, wait, but what about the denazifying? I thought we were going to denazify. What about the separatists in the Donbass region? What about the people, the Russian speakers who you said, Putin, are being genocided? You're going to leave the fucking genocide to happen in the Donbass because now Ukraine said they're not going to join NATO, which they weren't going to join anytime soon anyway? What the fuck is this reasoning? Like, we know that Putin has given more than one reason for invading Ukraine. He's claiming to be in there because there's a genocide happening against Russian speakers in the Donbass region. That's what he said. He can just lie and say Ukraine was successfully denazified. Yeah, well. Or it could be the case that NATO is an excuse, that NATO is a proxy issue because the very real Russian fear of invasion by Europe, that is a real fear, whether or not it's completely unfounded, doesn't really matter, that's the thing that's easy for him to politicize. That's why he brings up NATO, because NATO is the one that has a lot of political and emotional weight behind it.
Remember that by not doing this earlier, we've driven Putin into the arms of the communist Chinese.
It's kind of a doublethink where they acknowledge he lies sometimes, but not in the cases they like. Yeah, well, yeah.
Government. How blooming stupid can we possibly be? There is no advantage or interest to us in Ukraine joining NATO. If we make this concession at this stage...
What about the Ukrainians? Very strong advantage for them being in NATO.
In the aim of bringing peace, do you know something? It might just work.
Nigel, what would you say a few years down the line when Russia takes the rest of Ukraine? Which it will do.
Well, if you want us to go to the Third World War, if you want them to join NATO and send British troops there, that's fine. I mean, look.
That's not what he asked.
I am not saying...
That's not what he asked, Nigel, you fucking beta. All right.
Absolutely. I have a cast iron guarantee that I can stop the outbreak of war in the Ukraine. What I can say, I've got a much brighter idea than anybody else who are sticking to the same formula they've had for 30 years, which I believe to be a geopolitical mistake. And one of the reasons I say this is in 2014, we had the Orange Revolution in Kiev. Do you remember all the...
What?
And one of the reasons I say this is in 2014, we had the Orange Revolution.
Chat, spot the error. Nigel Farage doesn't give a fuck about Ukraine. Nigel Farage does not give a fuck about those Slavs down in Ukraine, those Eastern Europeaners who he's like, yeah, he's a decade off, yeah. The Orange Revolution did not happen in 2014. Happened in 2004. He's got his. This is the equivalent. This is him doing the lecturing the Irish on fucking freedom from like European Union or whatever, but then going on fucking Cameo and saying up the Ra because someone paid him £85 to say it. He's a fucking, he doesn't care. He like, that's why the Ukrainian perspective is like, it doesn't exist to him because they're not really people as far as Nigel's concerned.
In Kiev. Do you remember all the people in the square who were part of that coup that brought down a democratically elected leader of the Ukraine?
A Democrat. This guy is fucking on it. Look at him.
Yeah, that's where you're starting to lose.
Maybe
me.
a corrupt country.
Yeah.
Damn, these guys are getting ballsy. Nice. Is this him saying up the Ra?
There's a
Sussy
birth gay boy
Ah!
among us. Totally poggers. Well, you're a handsome lad, a sussy chungus pirate from Basildon, very cringe, and should vent to electrical.
What a fucking loser. All right, nice. Guy who identifies with like Winston Churchill or whatever the fuck.
He may have been a corrupt guy, but he was a democratically elected leader, brought down by people in the squares in Kiev, waving European Union flags, because the European Union had pumped in pre-accession aid, and it was the stated aim that they wanted Ukraine to join the European Union. Far from being an organisation that guarantees peace in Europe.
Wait a minute. What was the European Union giving Ukraine aid for? By the way, the argument here is that Yanukovych was democratically elected, although sussy condition, was also trying to ban protest. And when protests were happening, he ordered the police to fire on the protesters. And then he fled the country. I'm sorry, like, yeah, there are times when it's actually okay to overthrow your government. Sorry. That's why the American coup, the American fucking Wars of Independence, or whatever the fuck it's called. What's it actually called? Declaration of Independence? Wasn't it like a war before that? Yeah, like the same thing. Thought on Zelensky banning all opposition. What, in the middle of a war? Are you kidding me? Like, what? War of Independence? Yeah, the Revolutionary War. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think Zelensky should like have a fucking snap election in the middle of a fucking invasion? Get the people in Mariupol down to the polling booth. What the fuck are you talking about? What, dude? You know, like every country that goes to war ends up becoming a dictatorship, right? There were no general elections during the fucking Second World War in the UK. War of colonial aggression. True. Fucking United States, probably funded by the CIA to get rid of King George. Bring King George back. That's what Nigel Farage wants. What was it? Wasn't George the Fourth, was it? Was it George the... Ugh. George the Third. Wasn't he the mad one? Who is the mad King George? George the Third. Yeah, he was the mad one. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, there's a whole film called The Madness of King George. Isn't the Mad King from Game of Thrones based on him? Let's see what he looked like. Look, guys, this is actually your rightful leader, Americans. Just so you know. Just so you know, every president you've had was actually illegitimate. Trump was right. He just wasn't right about how far it goes. Every election. This is your legitimate leader. Just so you know. Least white Farage.
I think where we are today was provoked in large part actually by
Yeah,
Brussels.
but he's dead now. Yeah, but so are all your current presidents, right? Like, your current president is a dead man. The guy before him was a dead man. The guy before him, yeah, he was probably alive for a bit. Before him, definitely a dead man. That's why they speak like all, I believe that war is a dangerous location to be in. I wouldn't go to that country. That's why they talk like that, you know? Hey, Trad Chad Dad. Thanks for the follow. Hope you enjoy the stream.
And its expansionist tendencies. We've made some big mistakes here. And I made those arguments back in
Is that a southern accent? No, that was, shut up.
2014, to be condemned by everybody that somehow I was Putin's puppet. I'm not. I just think sometimes that concept of buffer states is actually a brighter thing to do than the line that we've been pursuing.
Here's where I think there's a flaw in your argument, if with all possible respect, of course.
I'm sure there is one.
I think the flaw in your argument is if what we need is a buffer zone, why, and if Russia is so desperate to have a buffer between itself and NATO, why is Russia expanding westwards?
Because he sees an historic coming together of the Russian peoples and all the rest of it.
Right.
And we have to make
So
it
that contradicts your idea of securing buffer states. Okay, nice.
clear to him.
There's some historical parallels there.
Well, let's take away from him any possible excuse he can have, any validation he can have. Firstly, with his own population, and second,
Bro, Putin's a fucking dictator. Why do you think he needs the consent of his people to go and ram into Ukraine? The fuck?
with all the rest of us. I think it's the right thing. So, what would you like to do? So Ukraine joins NATO. That's your
I'm not necessarily suggesting that Ukraine should join NATO.
Okay.
I think what I see is in the broader geopolitical. That's why I brought China into this.
Yeah.
The West is weak and is showing weakness.
Fine. Well, we saw that in Kabul last year, didn't we?
Right.
Oh god, yeah, we definitely saw that in Kabul, where the one president finally had the fucking courage to leave when they promised they would.
The people who, and you'll understand this because you understand how the real world works. You know, in the West we talk about, equality and diversity and well, whatever.
Oh, it's the they.
In the real world, people don't operate on that basis. They operate on land, money, finance, weapons, technology, espionage, right?
Oil, water,
exactly.
all these things.
And,
Kindness.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if that's true either. This is like the very it's almost the same argument that like Orthodox Marxists will give, all this identity politics, all this like freedom and democracy, and even like national sovereignty is all distracting from like the true class antagonism. But like, no, people are actually very motivated by nationalism, by sovereignty, by democracy, by gender rights, wherever the fuck. Yeah, of course, yeah. People operate on that shit pretty fucking hard. That's why the only reason that American conservatives ever got a hold of the southern states in America, one of the only reasons was because they ignored economic issues and focused on cultural issues. That's what they did. Like, places in the southern states used to be like very unionized and like very revolutionary and very like supportive of things like, like fucking like the New Deal and shit. Whereas like the way that the American conservatives won over places like Kansas, like Louisiana, like Alabama and all that was because they focused on things like abortion, like marriage, like culture wars. Like that's like painting like Democrats and redistributive economics as like the actions of fucking smug urbanites who hate like rednecks and shit like that. Yeah, the Southern strategy, yeah. It's not just racism, though. It's also like, there was a really good example of this, which was in 2004, before the Bush-Kerry election, there was this incident where The Guardian, actually like Guardian readers in the UK, wrote letters to random American houses, like random American families, and begged them to not vote for George Bush. Like, The Guardian, like the kind of like center left, like cosmopolitan paper, actually encouraged its readers to write letters to American families telling them to stop, to not vote for Bush. And the Republicans completely capitalized on that and said, like, look at all these like soy fucking Europeans trying to like smugly tell good, honest, red-blooded, ketchup-loving Americans what to do, right? It just completely played into their hands. Like the cultural antagonism was so well played. And even though the Iraq war was becoming increasingly unpopular, they actually managed to like almost sidestep that by pointing out how like European John Kerry was. Like there was this whole thing that like Fox News pushed out saying like that he looked really French, and like that actually had like a really big impact, like much more than the material conditions and all that shit. Like yeah, people are actually really motivated by that, like the opposite of, I guess, your bread and butter issues. Yeah, like this guy, they kept on saying that he looked French. Jean Kerry, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Human rights.
They said he could speak French as well. Yeah.
So what this looks like from the outside to me, as I look at it from a non-Western perspective.
You think people in power don't care about that? No, they care. No, people in power care about these things as well. Fucking hell, Putin talking about how his enemies eat oysters and love gender freedom. Yeah, he cares a lot. They all care about this stuff. Yeah.
Perspective is
Jordan Peterson beyond order. Nice.
West is distracted, the West is weak, and all the things that we would have quite liked to have done, right? If we, you know,
This
if you're
guy was
China,
so
well,
close.
yeah, you want to expand this way and you want to take over Hong Kong and you want to do this. So from my perspective, it depends on what people in the West want. If you want the managed decline of the West, this is what you're going to get.
I have a feeling if Donald Trump was in the White House, we wouldn't see little rocket man Farage. I don't think China will be quite as bad.
Oh no, he's doing the thing. Fuck me. Yeah, Trump, who was trying to undermine NATO and who like fucking literally like withheld aid from Ukraine. Jesus. Okay, whatever. We've done the meme. It's fine.
No.
Trump would have absolutely thrown Ukraine under the bus. Yeah, he fucking hates NATO and shit. Yeah.
About Taiwan as they are.
But that's my point.
And no. I mean, look, you know, Biden has been a catastrophe. The unilateral withdrawal from Afghanistan was a complete disaster.
Right.
And far from America is back, they've actually retreated away.
Clearly.
And the West is now without leadership.
But that's my point, Nigel. By advocating for the position you're advocating for, that's part of the same sort of, well, we just...
It's actually quite refreshing to see just how fucking stupid Nigel Farage is. Like, he's just an average, like, Fox, Tucker Carlson, OAN, like, NPC. He's just like a little pull string doll with all the takes just, like, rammed up his butt by wealthy Americans.
just need to, you know, appease these people. And instead of the West coming out and going, look, we are the world superpower. We're not embarrassed about our values. Our values are better than yours, right? Freedom, democracy, these are all good things. And we are going to spread them around the world because this is who we are. And we are the strongest thing. If you think China and Russia, if they were the dominant hegemony in the world, they wouldn't do that. You're insane.
No, I know. I just see that being seen to make something of a concession right now, gaining the moral upper ground in this whole diplomatic standoff that is currently going on over the Ukraine, when, as I say, it's not in our interests for them to join anyway. If he still goes to war, he still goes to war. We'd then be much more united against him because we would have been seen to have done the right thing. As it is.
What? So, if we say that Ukraine won't join NATO and Russia invades anyway, then we can do something about it. Okay. So, now that Zelensky has said Ukraine will not join NATO, is Nigel Farage going to change his tune on this? Because are we now seen to be doing the right thing? Like, what? I wonder. It's almost as if Putin doesn't give a fuck about whether or not Ukraine wants to join NATO. Because as long as Ukraine's in NATO, they're fair game to get invaded by Russia. As soon as Ukraine is in NATO, it's off the table. Like, Russia's never going into Ukraine if they become part of NATO. Because Russia doesn't fuck with NATO countries.
We're carrying on with a policy that's a mistake.
All right, segment. Fuck. Nice. Got him. If NATO said no to Ukraine, it invalidates their Russian cause. Mate, I don't know if you've realized, right? But the Russian cause is not valid anyway. The Russian cause was not made any more valid by the fact that Ukraine was maybe, possibly, I don't know, not likely going to join NATO. Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll take it. Nice. This is pretty shoehorned though, right? This guy's posture is actually doing pretty well.